everybody. My name is Danny Topalsky. Can you all hear me? Alrighty. I am a data science and analytics solution engineer at TIBCO, and thank you all so much for being here today. I look forward to walking you through a Spotfire discussion and a demo, but I'm going to start off with a bit of a company overview of TIBCO, and then get into some specifics about Spotfire, and then do some live examples in the tool. But I believe before we get into some of the details here, I believe there is a poll question that is ready, and we're going to ask if you can rate your Spotfire experience. It looks like somebody is saying that there is an echo. Are other people experiencing? Alrighty, well, I'm going to keep the poll open, give everybody a couple of seconds, a couple more minutes here to answer. Looks like so far, a lot of the people here are brand new and have never used Spotfire, which is great. Happy to introduce you all to the tool. And we're going to start with some very basic examples. So those of you who are new, never used Spotfire, will be able to get started. I think there is a download for the free trial and some sample data sets, which we'll be using. And that's great for users who've never used Spotfire before. And then later on in the presentation workshop, we'll get into some of the more advanced use cases like NLP and use an AI in Spotfire as well. Alrighty, well, the poll results are coming in. It looks like a lot of you have not used Spotfire before, so that's great. And I'll keep that in mind while we're going through some of the examples. And in the chat, you can see there's a link to download a free trial of Spotfire and 2 data sets that we'll be using in some of the workshops. So you can go ahead and do that while I am doing an introduction of TIBCO. Okay, so just to give a bit of a company overview, at TIBCO, we help customers innovate by providing advanced software tools and capabilities to connect systems, unify data, and predict the future. So these refer to our 3 pillars that are our main areas or product families: connect, unify, and predict. So connect includes API management, events processing, or process automation, events and messaging. Our unify platform includes data management and virtualization. And the predict product family or pillar includes visual analytics, data science, and streaming. And we'll be talking about the predict pillar today. Also, TIBCO is a globally trusted partner with footprints across a variety of industries and verticals, so like retail, pharma, manufacturing, banking, airlines, telecom, etc. We're also recognized as a leader in all areas by analyst reports like Forrester and Gartner, and I believe there is a Forrester Wave report that you can download for TIBCO as well in the window below. Oops, let me go back. So on this slide, you can see that because TIBCO has a portfolio of solutions that are seamlessly integrated, and there's also such a breadth of expertise and products available, TIBCO as a company can really address the full data journey. So we're seeing here as kind of how it all fits together, starting with the responsive application mesh that connects all your data. So again, this is the connect pillar with these API management, messaging, event processing capabilities. The Any Data Hub, which refers to the Unify pillar that has data management, data virtualization, and then hyper-converged analytics, which includes data science, model ops, visual analytics, streaming, and that's, again, what we'll be talking about today. So Spotfire fits into this hyper-converged analytics strategy. So hyper-converged analytics, this is a word that I introduced on the last slide. So what this means is it's TIBCO's strategy for analytics that combines visual analytics, data science, model governance, streaming, data virtualization, and data management. So it's kind of the next generation of analytics that goes beyond basic kind of BI and visualizations. It describes an extremely mature analytics strategy that has...
He's moving a lot. I think he likes Mountain Dew.
Oh, I think somebody might be off mute. Okay, I'll keep going. So this represents a mature analytics strategy with all of these capabilities built together, and it's a huge differentiator because you can really all these solutions are tightly integrated together, but they're also modular. So they allow customers to build solutions to utilize as much or as little of these capabilities as they need. But it's, like I said, a great differentiator that you can achieve this full strategy using highly integrated TIBCO products. And I bring up hyper-converged analytics today because Spotfire is actually at the center of this strategy. So Spotfire is seen as the single pane of glass for all of the modeling and analytics outputs. So with our data science tool, our model operations tool, you can connect these other TIBCO tools to Spotfire and visualize model outputs. You can also do that with R and Python, and it's really just more than a BI tool. And that's why, you know, it's at the center of the hyper-converged analytics strategy, and why we call it our advanced visual analytics tool rather than just, you know, a BI tool. So I'm going to go into some of the examples or some of the features of Spotfire before we get into some of the examples, just to give an overview. So first is, one of the main differentiators for Spotfire is brush linking and AI suggestions. So brush linking is the ability to point and click and drill down and see the relationships between the visualizations and the underlying data. This is something that Spotfire has pioneered, and this is a feature that we'll be working with today. Also, AI suggestions. So there is a built-in AI engine that makes suggestions, discovers relationships. So when you, as you can see in the graphic here, when you select a visualization, Spotfire is identifying the relationships between the variables in your data and providing suggestions in order of strength based on these relationships. And all you have to do is click and drag these AI suggestions into your dashboard and customize them. You can change the color, and again, we'll be looking at some examples today. You can also interact with your data using natural language query. So there's a search bar in Spotfire, which we'll be using today, where you can search in plain terms kind of what you want to see, and based on that, visualizations will be generated. You can also, there's also built-in data wrangling and data preparation capabilities that are also AI assisted. So suggestions for data prep, like removing white spaces and assisting with joins, are also you know, assisted through the AI-powered suggestions engine. Streaming is something we won't be looking at today, but I did want to note that streaming data in Spotfire acts exactly like static data, so you can filter, mark, brush link. So being able to wire an event stream to Spotfire and get real-time insight is a really huge differentiator for Spotfire as well. Also, one feature that's pretty exciting that was released recently is Spotfire Mods. So it's the ability to create a custom visualization in Spotfire using JavaScript that acts exactly like a native visualization. So you can create your own in JavaScript and try your hand at developing mods, or you can use a number of pre-built mods that are available at the TIBCO community site. Also, advanced analytics. So Spotfire has a built-in R and Python engine, and also, as I mentioned, is fully integrated with TIBCO data science tools. And we'll be seeing a couple of examples today where some machine learning modeling has been applied or embedded into a Spotfire dashboard, and we can see, you know, how we can interact with the data and the models in that way. There's also, so on top of the inbuilt data science and R and Python engines, one thing I didn't mention actually was geoanalytics. So we have advanced geoanalytics features in Spotfire with map layers and the ability to use styles from other APIs as TMS or WMS layers. And you can also map any kind of spatial data. It doesn't have to just be a latitude or longitude. So that's another example that we might see today if there's time at the end. Oops. Okay, and then finally, before I get into the demo scenario, I just wanted to talk a little bit about connecting to data. This might be a question that comes up, when people are thinking about Spotfire. So there are a lot of built-in connectors to a variety of data sources, databases, cloud sources, and other services, and they all come with the product, so they don't cost extra. So also one of the connectors is TIBCO data virtualization. So that opens the door to an even larger variety of connectors or data sources, because there are over 300 with TIBCO data virtualization. And I also wanted to note, so when Spotfire is consuming data, there are a lot of different ways to bring data into the analysis. So the data can be in memory or direct query in database if you're connecting to a database, or even a hybrid version. So this is available to all business users when creating the analysis and deciding if they want to bring the data in externally or in memory. So this isn't something that needs to be managed by IT, and it's great, especially for users who are using large amounts of data. I'm going to pause and check the chat to see if there's any questions before I continue. Alrighty, looks like I'm good to keep going. So that's everything that I had for slides, but now we're going to look at some specific examples. So let me check the poll results again. It looks like everybody who voted actually mentioned that they do not have any experience with Spotfire. So I think this first part will be great, this interactive part where we can just show a couple of simple examples, follow along if you were able to download the trial and the data sets. If you're not able to follow along, just, you can watch what I'm doing. Feel free to pause. I'm happy to pause and answer any questions. I'll try to check the chat periodically while I'm going through it. All right, I'm going to give everybody maybe just one more minute to either download the trial or open up Spotfire and save those data sets locally if you do plan to follow along. I'm just going to pause here for maybe one more minute. All right, and while everybody is doing that, I just am going to give an overview of what I'll go over today. So first, I'll start with the basics of Spotfire. That's kind of going to be the workshop part where people can follow along with me, and I'll just show some of the basics, but also the differentiators like the data wrangling, the AI, how to interact with your data using NLP, the AI engine. And then from there, we'll get into some more advanced demonstrations. I'll show a full demo from start to finish using in Spotfire with some data science components as well. And then we'll look at some specific NLP text analytics examples. So hopefully whoever is planning to follow along has gotten access to Spotfire and has been able to save the files locally. If you're using, I believe with the trial, you have the option to download the desktop client, or you can use the browser-based application. For what we are, the examples we're going through right now, you can use either one. So if it's faster to just use the browser, you're more than welcome to do that if you're following along. So this is what Spotfire looks like when you open the application. You can choose, right now I have the canvas styling is set to dark. So if yours looks different, that's why. But we are going to start by loading in some data. So I provided two data sets. They're just basic world, country, demographic data that we're going to use to create some basic visualizations. So to connect to your data, you're going to go to the upper left-hand corner of the application and choose the plus sign. And here you can see some recommendations of recent data and some recent analyses. You can also connect to a number of database connectors. If you're in the trial version of the web app, you might not see all these options. That's okay. But today we're just going to browse to a local file. So again, if you missed any of those steps, upper left-hand corner, plus sign, browse local file. And this will open your computer's file explorer. And the data sets that we're working with today are world countries and World Bank data. So let's start with the World Bank data and just select the file as you would, uploading any type of attachment. And you can see here, before you even load any of the data into Spotfire, you have some options for some transformations. So you can exclude columns and you can change the data type. And you can also make some specifications for, name row and ignore, those types of things. So I'm just going to press OK. And because this is our first look at, an AI recommendation. So I actually already have this World Bank data set uploaded into the tool because I've already, been working with it. But Spotfire has recognized that the matches in this data set is either related or the same. So you can view what this recommendation is. And the recommendation is to add it to an existing data table. And if you want to check, what the recommendation suggests, add as rows, World Bank data, and you can also make a number of transformations right there. I'm going to skip the recommendation and just upload it into Spotfire. And right away, you can see our data has been loaded into the tool. And in the flyout panel here is where you can see a summary of all of your variables. So these are all your columns in the data set. And when you select one of the variables, or even multiple, but if you select one, you can see that there is a summary depending on what type of variable it is. So for numbers, you get summary statistics, min, max, average, and just an overview of your data. You can see, metrics like how many empty values there are, and they also give you Spotfire also gives an option for how to deal with empty values, which is great. Sorry about that. And you can also change the data type and make some transformations here. We will get into the discussion about transformations and data prep in a little bit, but just to get back to the overview, here's also where you can see the AI engine in action. So if you're selecting a variable in the flyout and you hover over and click the light bulb icon on the top left here, you can see that these are relationships, or these are suggestions that have been put forth by the AI engine based on the relationships between this highlighted variable population and the data. Also, I wanted to note that at this point, there's no latitude or longitude or any type of location or geoanalytics data inside Spotfire. But because of the geoanalytics and the maps that are already embedded into the library, Spotfire does give you an option, for geoanalytics without with only just using the country name or a country code. So that's another area that we're going to explore. So there's a couple of different ways that you can start building a visualization. You start from the data. So again, if you know you want to look at a specific variable and you want to use some of the suggestions provided by the engine, if you want to start with the visualization, if you want to explore by searching. So let's just start by looking at the population by region. So again, if you select the magnifying glass on the blank page or in the upper right-hand corner, you can just use natural language to search for, what you might be interested in. And you can see that you can just select the visualization and it's already been created for you. And this is also fully customizable. So even if you select a suggestion, it's not locked, or you don't have to keep it the way the engine suggested. You could even just change. You can change really anything about the visualization. So I just changed it from region to the income group by population. So that's one way. you can build analysis. We can also start from a specific visualization. So in the same panel where you add data and you can access your data in the flyout, you can also go down to this bar chart icon, and this is where all your visualization types will be stored. Let's select to add a line chart. So as soon as you select a visualization type, Spotfire recognizes the combination of variables that might make sense for that specific visualization, but again, just as a default. But again, you do not have to, it's fully customizable. So we can go ahead and change this to something that we might be interested in. Let's change the x-axis to, we want to keep it to year, but we don't want it to be a continuous variable. So Spotfire gives you a lot of different options for date time, variables, but let's just choose the first version for year here. I'm going to check the chat to make sure no questions. Okay. And let's look at the population. So you can do this directly on the axis with these axis selectors. Also, you can choose the aggregation. There's tons of different aggregations and statistical methods as well. So, and these aggregations are also present in transformations as well, not just the axes. Let's go sum the population. And right now we're seeing the population for over the years for the all of the data in one line. But if we want to see it by region, we can specify that in line by. And now we can see that the population has generated a line, or there's a line for the population trend for each region. If we want to also color by region, we can do that as well. So I also want to note that I'm just using these kind of shortcut axis selectors, but to edit visualizations and maybe do some more advanced styling or data limiting, you can use the this gear icon. So on every visualization, if you hover in the top right and select the gear, that's the visualization properties. So this is where you'll be building your visualizations and customizing them. So right now, I think we have everything we want there. And you can also do something called building a details visualization. So it's a visualization just based on the marking of one data set. You can also change the data table here. I just noticed, so I was trying to show some of the brush linking, but it looked, because I have more than one of these data sets in here for World Bank, it wasn't linked. So let's create a details visualization for this line chart here. Or actually, let's add some labels just to, show another element of styling. So if you go to the properties and navigate down to labels, why don't we check the box for line identifier? So it just makes it easier to see what we're looking at. And also you can hide the legend as well, so things look a little bit cleaner. You can, make the legend, you can specify what you want to show in the legend. Sometimes it's nice to just have the color, and you can even further edit that by, so this already looks much cleaner by removing all of that extra space. So to create a details visualizations, let's click into, just right click into this visualization here that we created on the line chart and select create details visualization. Let's do a bar chart again, and I'll make a selection just to see what the default is. Looks like population over year. Let's do the population by the country here. So this looks, we can't really tell what's going on here. So right away we know we might want to stylize this a little bit, go into the properties. we'll start by going into appearance and selecting horizontal bars, so that switches the rotation. We can also go down to sorting and select sort bars by value. So this is a details visualization where you can see that it is populated by the marking of this visualization above. So you can see how this reacts to the filtering and the marking of the master visualization, I guess you could call it. You could also turn that off if you wanted to. So right now we have marking enabled, but you can, instead of it showing an empty visualization. So again, sorry if I'm going too fast, but that was in the properties, in the data. This is marking is where you can specify these brush linking capabilities. So you can have multiple different marking schemes. So if you want one page of data that, responds to some marking and other visualizations that don't, you can specify that in these marking schemes. And we'll be looking at an example later on that has that shows kind of the power of different layers and marking schemes in geoanalytics. So let's say instead of an empty visualization, we would just want all of the data to be there. So when nothing's marked, everything is showing. But when something's marked, only the corresponding data points are showing here. Another thing you can do is going back into the properties, you can show and hide items. So you can add a rule for, let's say we only want to see the top 5 countries by population for that selection. You can do that easily. And even when nothing's marked, because of that rule, when nothing is marked, it's relative to, the entire visualization. So this is the top 5 populations based on the entire data set. And now you can see how that changes just based on the selection. So those are some just very basic examples of, how you can create visualizations and just some getting started. It's really easy to just, drag and drop these suggestions into the dashboard. You could also look at maybe one of these map examples. So if we, for example, population, again, there's no latitude or longitude in the data, but Spotfire recognizes this and automatically generates that for us. And we can see here that we have, just like that, an extremely easy geoanalytics that's fully, again, brush linked. You can highlight areas and you can specify the different properties. So right now we have a marker. So each mark is a country name and the color is by the country code, and the shape you can specify different shapes for different values. And right now the size is based on the population of the marker. You can add different layers to maps, and we'll go into some examples later on, but just on a basic level, you can add different layers and you can toggle them on and off. So this is taking out the data layer. If we just had the data layer without the map, that's what it would look like. And you can edit the different layers and the properties individually. So for if we wanted to change, for example, the size of the marker, well, it's way too big. you can make those changes in there. So it's a very simple data set and a very simple example, but you can just see that it's pretty quick and easy to build a Spotfire dashboard, and especially when you have these suggestions and these guides that are built in along the way. So this is helpful for people who are just getting started and might need some more guidance with analytics. This is also just helpful for even if you're a more advanced analytics practitioner, but you are doing some ad hoc analysis, help save time. And it's also just, this can also, the AI engine and some of the suggestions can help explain some actual relationships between variables and also modeling outputs, which we'll see in a later example as well. So I'm going to stop there and go to the question box. Yes, so We will get into some AI examples. This is just a brief overview for people who aren't familiar with Spotfire. We're going to go into talk about the data canvas next, and then after that, we'll get into some more examples of how Spotfire can be used with AI and machine learning modeling. So we're now done with this part. We're going to navigate to the data canvas. If you go into the lower left-hand corner of the application and select this, this icon here, this navigates you to the data canvas. So the data canvas is where all the transformations, joins, data prep is tracked from when you start authoring to the final output. So this allows you to visually keep track of everything that you do to the data. And the AI engine also provides guidance for, to make things easier in this step. So for example, suggestions like trimming white spaces or assistance with joins. So this is, right now, we don't really, this isn't, there are no transformations or joins that have been made. In another example that we'll go through today, you'll see how the data canvas, there can be quite advanced data prep done in the data canvas and how it makes it really easy to follow from the point of authoring to the final data set that's used in the analysis. So going back to our example here, if you want to follow along, we have, if we want to, make a join clause here, you can select the plus sign in the middle of the, in the data set, and we can add columns. So let's add, this is where our other data set that was available for download will come into play. You can select the world countries data set and click settings for added columns. And you can see that Spotfire, the AI engine, has already identified a column match here. You can add additional matches. So for this example, we'll probably match by country code. And that has a different column name in the data, so it wasn't automatically detected. Let's remove region. And here you can look at the different join settings. So this is a left join or a left outer join. And Spotfire just makes it really easy and visual to understand how you're joining tables and what the join clauses, what the result will be. You can also see that it's color coded by the match data, the original data, the match data, and the new data. And that's the same for any type of join you want to do. So for this example, we'll just choose a simple join, press OK. And here in the data canvas, you can see the original data, the new data, how the join results, and then your final data set. You can also add transformations like calculated columns. You can pivot and unpivot, replace specific values, and there's tons of built-in operators and functions, over 200 functions in Spotfire, where you can manipulate the data. For example, one example here is, so you can use logical operators as well. So this is if the population is greater than 4.5 million, then it's large, otherwise it's small. So let's call this population category. And right there, you can see that a new column was created, and that step was added to the data canvas. You can edit these steps, and you can also delete them. So if you want to change, or if you change your mind and you don't need that in the data, you can do that. And I also wanted to note that anything that you do, any transformations you make in the data flyout will also be recorded in the data canvas. So for example, if you want to change a variable here, it gives you the option to just say we wanted to change the name of this capital city to having a lowercase letter, just as an example. Select apply. And even if that change was made in this part of the data, it will be, the step has been recorded here in the data canvas. And again, that's something you can edit and or you can delete it. And this is just really great, especially if you're working with multiple different data sources and data sets. All of your data sets kept in one place, and you can toggle between them. And yeah, any transformations you need to make will be recorded here. Also, if there's something that you can't do, so more advanced operation, you can use R or Python to do that as well. And so where you would register these R and Python data functions, you can use them for data prep, also modeling, which we'll see, really anything that you want to do because they're fully functioning in the tool. You just need to specify input parameters and output parameters. So that would be in the tools menu here. So you can see TER tools and Python tools. TER is just TIBCO's enterprise runtime for R. So TIBCO has an optimized R engine for the tool, but you can also just use R as well. So if you want to register a data function, you can use TER, or you can just use open source R, or you can use Python as well. And we'll look at some examples coming up shortly. All right, let me check the chat for any questions. Okay, let me stop here. The data canvas is not a module. The data canvas is actually just part of the tool, so it's not extra. It just comes with the tool, and it's just built right into Spotfire. So anybody who, even the most basic version of Spotfire will have the data canvas. And another person asked what the difference between Spotfire and Tableau. So, the tools are always changing, and I haven't checked the most recent versions of Tableau, but I do know on a higher level that the advanced analytics capabilities, so TIBCO has been investing in advanced analytics in Spotfire for a very long time. So we don't require a lot of, third-party integration. It's just a very seamless experience using R and Python inside Spotfire. Also, the brush linking capabilities are very advanced in Spotfire. There are not a lot of limits to what you can do in terms of filtering, marking, and brush linking. So on a high level, TIBCO or Spotfire has extremely powerful advanced analytics capabilities that a lot of other BI tools don't have. Alrighty. So moving on to another example. Well, I guess on that topic, we can get into a bit of a discussion on the advanced analytics, but this is still using a more basic concept. So we're looking now at the same nation's data, or the countries that we were using. At this point, the follow along, the live examples, I'm finished with the live examples. So if you just want to follow along, feel free to ask questions, but we're getting into some of the, more advanced analytics areas, capabilities. So we won't be doing, a live build of the next section of this presentation. So here we have a clustering example that's using a k-means clustering that was actually put together using one of our data science tools and was entered as a data function in Spotfire that's being executed on the data here. You can also recalculate the clusters, and you can trigger a data function either from R or Python or another data science tool by changing the parameters in this box right here. Again, now this is very powerful because a lot of the times if you're doing a cluster analysis, your output is, you can't really interact much with your output. A lot of the times you can get a static scatter plot where you can see, some of the different profiles of the clusters. But with Spotfire and, the combination of Spotfire's advanced analytics capabilities and able to integrate with other tools, you can really bring this type of analysis to life, and it's much more interactive, and you get a lot more insight out of something like a cluster analysis, for example. So for those who aren't familiar, a cluster analysis is a statistical classification method where groups of data are being grouped together based on their nearest neighbor, let's say. So without getting into too much detail, that's kind of a high-level overview. cluster analysis can be used also for anomaly detection, which we'll see, or outlier detection, which we'll see shortly. So here we have a visualization, just a simple bar chart with 3 of the different cluster profiles, and we can see which countries belong to which cluster. We also have a heat map here where we can see, select, the regions based on the clusters, and also a parallel coordinate plot to see the different, what the cluster groups have. So the population for this green for cluster group 2 versus cluster group 1, you can see, the difference in those variables. So one thing we can do using Spotfire's, marking and brush linking capabilities is highlighting this histogram, which has distance to centroid, which is a measure that comes from cluster analysis that shows how far away the members of the cluster group are from other members in their cluster group. So you can highlight these points in the histogram, and you can see some potential outliers for these selected points. You can also do it the other way around. So this is looking at the distance to centroid versus population. So these 2 points here, compared to their cluster group, their population is very different from other members in their cluster group. So we can highlight those variables and see that India and China, in relation to other members, India is in cluster group 3 as a higher population, and that's to be expected, and China also from cluster group 1. So we're using data where we might understand why these would be outliers, but in data that you're doing a cluster analysis on, and you're trying to understand why there might be outliers that are having a distance to centroid farther than other members of their cluster group. This is a really powerful tool. And then also with understanding the variables, that's another way where the AI engine comes into play. So if we're looking at, here's the data set where the cluster analysis was from. If we're looking at distance to centroid, which is what we're using to kind of look for outliers, we can look at some of the suggestions that come up and see, for example, Spotfire has detected that it might be interesting to look at the relationship with literacy, the relationship with death rate. So if we want to, look there, we can again look for some outliers and potentially try to understand what these are here. And it appears that there might be a higher death rate for these 3 countries than compared to their cluster group members. So that's just something that you might not think to look at specifically. And that's, again, how the AI engine with Spotfire just really helps with these types of analyses when you're just getting started, or if you're doing an ad hoc kind of analysis. Last thing I'll show with this page, and then I'm going to go into another demo, is just some of the advanced analytics built in. So this cluster analysis that you've seen here, this was registered as a data function from our data science tool. You can also have done this in R Python, and then there's also some built-in advanced analytics capabilities where you don't need an outside package or to register as a data function. One example of this is regression modeling. So if we wanted to create a regression tree, which is basically a way of where it's going to generate a variable importance plot. So we're going to choose a predictor column. I'm going to use the World Bank data set. If we want to look at the life expectancy, if we want to see what variables are most important or have the most influence on predicting life expectancy, we can do that right in Spotfire without any other tool. And all you have to do is just select your response column and the columns that you want to go to be analyzed. So you probably want to, you wouldn't want things like country name in there. So maybe some other, yeah, not region either. Okay, so this is just an example, you know, just to show you all how it works. You just highlight and add, and then you can see that the equation has been, or the formula expression has been automatically generated. You just select OK. And with just the press of one button, we have a regression tree here that has the residuals versus the fitted and the variable importance plot. So right now, the variable importance plot is saying that the population of urban percentage has one of the biggest influence on the life expectancy. And whether or not this analysis, you know, it's a caveat. I mean, this isn't, you know, fully put together analysis with removing null values and everything, but it's just to show how, you know, these advanced analytics capabilities are just very readily available and easily accessible in Spotfire. You can also edit these models too. So if we wanted to take out, you know, one of these variables, you could easily do that. All right, I'm going to check the chat for any questions. Alrighty, well, if there are no questions on kind of the overview of Spotfire, I'm going to go into another demo of a different use case. Okay. So we're going to go back to this demo that I have here, and what you're seeing now. Oh, and I also just wanted to note that in Spotfire, there is an editing and a viewing mode. So viewing mode, usually if you're presenting to people, you can't actually change the visualizations when you're in viewing mode. So just thought I'd point that out. I'm going to go back to editing mode just in case there's anything I want to show you all behind the scenes while we're going through the demo. So this demo includes a lot of elements of what we spoke about in a cohesive story that we're all familiar with to a certain extent. So it shows brush linking, the filtering, geoanalytics, Spotfire mods, which we actually haven't spoken about yet, rich visuals, and then also data science components as well. So this demo is on the opioid prescription rate in the United States. This was put together using publicly available data from multiple different government data sources. And what we're looking at here is a national overview of the opioid prescription rate per 100 people. We have a map chart here that is showing the prescription rate per 100 people. The darker the mark and the larger the mark, the higher the prescription rate for that area, as well as the number of marks. We have a tree map here that has a hierarchy of states. So the larger the section and the darker the color, the higher the prescription rate per 100 people. And then a histogram here, which we can again use to look at outliers, which outliers in this case would be opioid prescription rates per 100 people that are high, they're much higher than the national average, which is in 2011 was 92.5 about. You can also change the date. So with this time slider here, we are looking at 2011. So to just go into an example, maybe if we want to look at these areas that might, need further investigation because they're coming out as having the highest prescription rate per 100 people, we can select multiple different states at once, and you can see how the map reacts to the selection. And this just shows how powerful geoanalytics is for, not only just creating rich visuals, but if you look here, you can see that there's very larger and darker marks along the borders. And that could indicate that individuals are going across borders to obtain opioid prescriptions. And that's could be an area of focus potentially for law enforcement. And this use case was put together for a public health and law enforcement use. So a lot of this may not be, the subject matter may not be relevant to what you may be interested in using Spotfire for, but a lot of the features and the principles and the features of Spotfire here are transferable to across industries. So you can see there, you can also see that the highlight some of these points here on the histogram that have extremely high prescription rates. And you can see that it is these areas along the borders that might be areas of concern to look at further. You can also see in 2011, the national average was around 92.5. And if you just take a look at the map here, after law enforcement and more public health intervention was taken, you can see how the prescription rate per 100 people, how the visualization just changes from 2011 to 2017. You see how the national average went from 92.5 to 68. And despite the national average going down, there's far fewer outliers and areas that are way above that national average. If you select those areas, you can see that there are probably some areas that could still use some support and attention. But it's cool to just look how from 2011, if you just look at the color of the map, and then 2017, you can see how the situation has improved a lot. So this is just an example of some pretty good insights that you can get with just visualizations. We haven't employed any type of modeling or data science yet on this. Alrighty. This is a similar view. So this is the prescription level, this prescription rate at the state level, though. The last page we were looking at was at a national level. You can use the drop-down, this is just essentially a filter that was applied to a text area. So you can apply filters directly to visualization pages to look at individual groupings such as states. You can also use the filter. I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but on the right-hand side at the top of the ribbon bar, the filter icon, this is, you can also apply filters. Here are all your variables here, and you can apply filters through this way as well. Again, everything is fully brush linked. Here we have the breakdown of the prescription rate by the county and a map. We also have a prescription rate trend line, and one thing that you can do is select a line where you can see that there is an upwards trend. So you might want to select that and see, why that may be. Here is an example of a Spotfire mod. So this is not a native visualization Spotfire. This is something that was created using JavaScript, but this mod is also available for download now, and I think it might be yes. So you can also create icons when you're creating custom visualization mods. So here is the circular tree map that we're seeing here, and it looks and acts exactly like a native visualization in Spotfire. You can see how kind of there's like a separation between these two and the rest of the visualizations in Spotfire. All right, so the next section here, we are getting into some of the more advanced analytics areas. What we're seeing here is a network chart, and this is an example of a mod that was developed by the TIBCO team. And this network analytics and this network chart are used to analyze complex relationships between a variety of entities. So any data that has multiple relationships and connections can benefit from using a network chart, because you can use these types of visualizations to pull out patterns that might not be visible, to the naked eye. So this looks like a lot, but I'll explain, what's going on in this visualization here. So this whole tab has the distributor, the opioid distributor to pharmacy relationships. So in terms of the prescription rates, so this is this distributor has the highest highest number of pharmacies. So you can click into these and you can see that, just to explain the network chart, that the clusters represent the distributor and the smaller marks around represent the buyers. And the lines that are connecting connect the buyers to the networks of distributors, and they're colored by state, so where that network of individuals are located. And you can see that there are the thickness of the line indicates the frequency of the relationship. So you can see here that there is a very thick red line that's indicating like a high frequency, interaction between these two networks. And that might be something that, like, law enforcement in this use case might want to take a look at. So for example, this is in Pennsylvania and New Jersey is where this connection lies. So here we have another network chart that is activated by brush linking, but this is instead just looking at the relationship between the pharmacies or the increase. So it's basically looking at the increase in prescription rates by milligrams. So you can also see, when you highlight, you can see the network chart here. And there's also a smaller network chart that is showing a buyer's analysis here. Oops, there we go. And if you highlight more than one, you can try to analyze if they have any entities in common that you might want to take a look at. Oops. Oh, I guess I should mention there are a couple of other features like bookmarks that I just used the bookmark. So especially sometimes with the network charts, if you're giving a presentation or you have an area of interest that you want to return to, you can bookmark your selection. So I had a bookmark for these areas to be highlighted because there was an interesting relationship here where two of these buyers who've increased their total year-over-year dosage, they do have a distributor in common, as you can see in the network chart. So that's an area that I added a bookmark to. So all you have to do is, if you want the page to return to the current state that it's in terms of filtering and marking, is you just select to add a bookmark. Okay. So the next two sections that we're going to talk about in analysis, these will look at some of the data science components that were created in one of our data science tools and registered in Spotfire to visualize the output. So when I talk about hyper-converged analytics, this is kind of an example of what I mean. So the actual models that we're going to see were built outside of this tool, but they are connected with the data function, and the model executes based on parameters that can be changed within Spotfire. So this is a forecast here, and you can see that it generates a forecast, and you can specify the number of steps for each state. And again, the higher the prescription rate, the darker the mark. So the map is colored by county, and it also generates a trend line for the county as well. Another model that was built in Team Studio, or our data science tool, and visualized in Spotfire for anomaly detection is an isolation forest model. So the purpose here is to use the variables in the data to highlight anomalous areas or areas that are exhibiting, strange patterns by looking at variables in the data. So, for example, in this, the model generates a median anomaly score. So you can see the lower the anomaly score, the more the median anomaly score, the more anomalous the area may be. So this could be, so for example, North Carolina looks like the model detected some unusual patterns here. So if we want to select this, we can look in and look at maybe some of the counties where the prescription rates are higher. and looking at some of the trend lines as well. And a next step to this analysis could be a root cause analysis to identify maybe why the model identified this as North Carolina as having a lot of anomalous patterns in the data. This could be something like the opioid prescription rate versus the population, for example. All right, I'm going to check the chat. Are there any questions on anything that I just spoke about before I keep going? Okay. So now we are going to look at some NLP text analytics examples. So right now we have a dashboard for Airbnb reviews for sentiment analysis. And this sentiment analysis was performed using Python. There's a Python data function and NLP model that has been embedded into the data set. And this analysis was put together by Neil Canungo and the data science team from TIBCO. And that group from TIBCO is responsible for Dr. Spotfire, which is a YouTube channel that does a lot of really good tutorials and just training on anywhere from basic to very advanced topics in Spotfire. So you should check that out for sure if you're interested. But this dashboard is taking a Python model that you can see here. So when you're registering a Python or an R model, you're doing it right inside of this data function, and you're writing the script just as you normally would. So what we're looking at here is a sentiment analysis and an LDA model that is basically training the entire data set and then using the model to predict the best topic or category for each reviewer row. And then is using the Vader package from Python to assign a polarity score, which is or a sentiment analysis score. So whether it's a negative, falls into a negative or a positive review. So this is just an example, of what, if you're familiar with scripting in R and Python, just to give you a look at just how it would look like a normal IDE. But if you're not, don't worry about it, because there are a lot of pre-built data functions available for download in the TIBCO community, which I'll show an example of in a bit. So you can still leverage these types of capabilities without, being an expert R or Python scripter. So also just to mention, you write the script just as is, but how you get the script to communicate with your data that's loaded into Spotfire is by specifying input and output parameters. So the input text is a column that has the reviews, and the number of topics and these other properties are actually being controlled by these controls right here on these parameters. So this is also, again, fully brush linked. So these are the results. These are some of the top keywords that were generated from the Python data function. If we want to select the values that had the lowest sentiment score, we can scroll and we can look for some of the reviews that might not have been so good. So the reservation was canceled, somebody, the word small triggered a lower, sentiment score, and so on. And then again, another low 0 score because the reservation was canceled. So yeah, that's an example of just using text analytics. There's also a word cloud here, which I added. This is a word cloud is another example of a Spotfire mod. So this is not a native visualization, but you can actually filter and select just as you would any other visualization. And we'll look at an example here where you would use a word cloud with just single word n-grams rather than entire keyword phrases. And I also did want to mention, while this isn't an overview or an in-depth session about natural language processing, natural language processing, just to take a step back, so it's using text analytics to parse through natural or unstructured data to make sense out of and gain insight from things like reviews, like we're looking at surveys, social media, and user input data. So if you're having, if you have a field where, people are responsible for typing in, this is another good use case for natural language processing. And a lot of these parameters, when you're putting together an NLP model, they're basically, at a very simple level, they're based off of n-grams. So n-grams is how it's extracting the features. It's defining basically the words or the sequence or the tokens from the unstructured data and pulling them out. So when you're defining the type of n-grams, as we'll see, this phrase, for example, data science fun, it could be split if it's specified as a unigram. This is what the NLP kind of the algorithm would split it up into. A bigram would be something like this, and then a trigram is the entire phrase. So you can see how these inputs influence what the model will do and how it'll treat pairs of words and phrases. Okay, so here's the overview. Again, the full reviews, the sentiment, and then a word cloud. You can also execute the Python model here and change the sample size. We have another page here that has the sentiment by month. So you could see if there are patterns for maybe a lower sentiment score in a certain time period. You could also see, analyze some of the neighborhoods by the average sentiment for the Airbnbs in Seattle, and then also the response time. We also have a geoanalytics map here as well. And I did want to mention that there is another data function in this analysis that's generating a heat map, and I'll turn this off. And so this is another data function. It's actually an R data function that's generating a heat map based on the average sentiment scores for the reviews based on that location, which is pretty cool. So it's really powerful that Spotfire has, in the exact same workspace, we have a Python model performing advanced text analytics. And we also have an R model that's, using a map contour heat map in the same workspace. So you can see that in one dashboard, we have both R and Python open source working to make a pretty cool analysis here. Another thing to mention is the AI engine again. This is what I was explaining with, how the AI engine is really great if you just don't know what you should visualize, but it's also telling us something about the analysis. So sentiment is an output from one of the NLP models. And it's looking at this variable and it's explaining, it's almost doing a little bit of a model explainability here. So it's showing the relationship between scores communication and if they're a superhost or not. So basically, Spotfire is recognizing that the sentiment score is more positive if the person is a superhost, or if the person, or by the check-in time, the response time. So not only is the AI engine just good for helping out and getting started, but also has some advanced uses as well. All right, does anybody have questions? Okay. I have one last example today, and this is another natural language processing example that I have. This is a pre-built toolkit and template that was actually built by a colleague of mine at TIBCO, Sweta. She did a great job, and this is available for download on the community site. So I can show you if you, I can provide this link if you're interested. So this is an example of a pre-built data function and actually a starter DXP or a starter Spotfire file, where you can download this from the community site. You can, it's really just a download right here. And it gives you the full instructions on how to create an NLP dashboard in Spotfire. So if you're not a Python or R expert, or even if you are, but you just don't want to go through the hassle, there are 2 pre-built data functions. So if you don't want to go through, you know, all this work that Sweta has already done for us, there are just a couple of things that you have to do. So let me back up a bit and say what these data functions are going to do. So one is to extract the n-grams in the features. So it's just to do to show, you know, the most frequently occurring words, and to pre-process the text so it can you know, be ready for these keywords and the most frequent n-grams. And it's also doing a sentiment analysis and grouping. So these are known entities. So where the words, you know, fall under the type of part of speech. So whether it's a noun, verb, or an adjective, the positive tags, and then the negative tags. So this is doing the n-gram features and then also the sentiment analysis. So all you have to do when you download, this is exactly what it looks like. I downloaded it from the community site earlier today. And there's just a couple of steps that you would have to go through. You would just have to install these Python packages, and the directions to do so are right here. But just to show, to install R or Python packages, you just navigate to Tools at the top of the screen. And there's Python tools, R tools. Let's just go to Python, and then you would select Package Management. And it's just loading right now. So these are all the packages that are already installed. And if you want to search for a package that you need, I've already downloaded them. But just to show you how to do that, you would just press install. I already have that, and I don't want to install it again, so I'm going to leave that there. The same thing goes for R. TER is, I already explained what TER was, I think. But yeah, so TER is just TIBCO's enterprise runtime for R. But you can also add the packages here the same way. You could also launch a console right from Spotfire. You can also even launch an RStudio console right from Spotfire. So it's pretty cool. Okay, so back to this example, you just have to follow some of these instructions. So download the packages, and there's just a couple of lines that you have to run in the console. Again, just to launch the console, you go to Tools, Python Tools, Launch Python Interpreter, and you can just copy and paste these commands into the console. And then the next step that you would have to do is specify the parameters. Well, let me go backwards. You would have to replace the data set, which is really easy to do. You can just select replace, or you can select replace, you know, here as well. So in the data canvas, you would just have to replace the data source and specify where the text column is. So the name of my text column is called comments. There's an optional field if you have an ID column, so a unique identifier, and then a sample size. And there are a couple of notes that you should be aware of. Some parameters for lemmatization, so that's whether you want to group words or not, remove special characters, stop words, which stop words are like the, but, so any words that don't really have any meaning and shouldn't influence your sentiment score or any of your text analysis. So these are just, you can explore, you know, there's a lot of helpful resources to explain what all of these mean, but on the most basic level, all you have to do is replace your data source, download the packages, and follow the instructions to just specify the input variables in the sample size. And then when you run, and then just select run, and it runs it for you. So the result is for the most frequent n-grams. You can look at them as, you know, n equals 1, n equals 2, or n3. And they're also, you can use these word clouds to look more into it. And this is just a starting point. You can create an entire analysis just like the Airbnb one that we looked at. And you can also, you know, use this to add a word cloud. So that's the Spotfire mod. Well, I don't actually know if it's in here. Well, I can show you all how to add a mod. Then if we wanted to add the word cloud into this visualization, you can see that because it's a mod and not a Spotfire native visualization, you have to go to this icon right here. Find visualizations in library. I'm pretty sure I saved this to the library. I did, yeah. So it's already there, but you could also upload the mod from a local file. Select that. And just like that, you can see that we have a word cloud, but I want to, you know, edit a little bit. So for the words, I want to use, what is it? I forget what this is called. Okay, top n-grams. So the data set that is producing this is top n-grams, not demo test review. So words n-gram. And that's populating. Oh. N-gram. All right, ooh, I'm not sure why that is. Hold on. Okay, well, I'm not sure why the word cloud is not populating as it should. But okay. Well, we have an example of the word cloud working functionally in this other example here. I'm not sure quite why that's working, but I can tinker around with it and get it back working if I can answer some questions, you know, in the meantime, because I think we're at the end of the demo. I don't have anything else to show, but if there are any questions, I think we have a little bit more time left. So if there are questions where anybody wants to see something specific, I am happy to try to show them. So I'll leave the chat open. Okay, well, if there are no further questions, that's all I had today. I really appreciate everybody following along, and thank you so much for joining. I really enjoyed this, and I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions. And yeah, please let me know if there's any questions I can answer about Spotfire, and thank you so much for your time.